Although I never played the game myself, I was fascinated by a story about a player-driven economy in the MMORPG Elder Scrolls Online, or ESO. As in other Elder Scrolls games, like Skyrim or Oblivion, you can become a vampire by being bitten by one. And if you're at least 5% emo goth, the prospect of being a vampire is pretty much the coolest thing ever. There was only one problem. The NPC monsters that needed to bite you to enable your transformation were nowhere to be found. It turns out that the NPC spawn was not terribly common. It also turns out that players working together in guilds could control access to vampirism by repeatedly killing said NPC, so that unaffiliated players were pretty much never able to become vampires. Of course, there was still one route to become a vampire. If you paid the guild a ridiculous sum of in-game gold for one of their vampire members to bite you. This hilariously mercenary behavior was surely not anticipated by the game developers, who only wanted to make an expansive and immersive world for their player base. Compare this to Guild Wars 2, another MMORPG. This is a game I did play. While not perfect by any means, Guild Wars 2 had the most cooperative player base in any MMORPG I'd ever heard of. And it's not because the players were more enlightened. Instead, the game was carefully designed to minimize your ability to troll other players and to maximize your reward for working together. Gone were the days of spawn stealing, as even in ungrouped content, all players would get loot and experience from killing monsters, not just the player who attacked the monster first. Even in grouped content, unique loot was given to each participant, eliminating conflict over who would get what piece of shiny treasure. Simply put, Guild Wars players were not better than ESO players, they simply had better incentives. Yet sometimes we see corrupt politicians and greedy CEOs, and we wonder about them. Why can't you just be a good person? What good could be done in this world if only those in corporate leadership weren't so focused on squeezing every last drop of profit out of their customers, or if they were willing to pay their workers fairly? If politicians would focus more on functional and sustainable economic policies, rather than sensationalist claims serving only to improve their chances of election or re-election. Why does such bad behavior happen so rampantly among those in powerful, impactful roles? We only need look at the incentive structures of the systems in which we all operate. Every single one of us responds to incentives, after all. An academic scientist may receive more funding by doing research that publishes papers in top-tier journals, rather than research that produces the most beneficial insights. A student may receive more college scholarships by cheating to do well on exams, if they can do so undetected. A drug company will make more money from expensive and marginally effective drugs that require lifelong treatment by patients, rather than by producing inexpensive drugs or drugs that are only taken for a short period of time by patients. An employee might improve their chances for promotion if they take credit for someone else's work or create situations that might cause other coworkers to be evaluated negatively or get fired. A politician is rewarded with the most campaign money by promoting policies which benefit special interest groups that make large donations, rather than policies which benefit the general electorate. A taxpayer might utilize loopholes that minimize their tax burden, even when doing so is dishonest. A journalist will get more views by writing sensationalist, divisive content rather than nuanced, truthful content. There is a cost to doing the right thing. Being good, when there is incentive to do otherwise, goes against survival. Now, survival can mean different things to different people, and humans are complex creatures with needs that go far beyond immediate security. Putting food on the table, procuring a generational home, preserving natural ecosystems from human influence, enacting policies that will enforce one's religious code of ethics, all of these can be attached to our identity and thus our survival. A great deal of time could be spent delving into this topic, and some have done so. We'll divert our attention today, but in brief, it would not be too far off to categorize pretty much everything that we do as survival. Now, survival might be the goal, but in the game of life there is no God mode. There is no upper limit on survivability. Even if you own a trillion-dollar company, even if you're the leader of a nation, even if you're the biggest social media influencer, you are still vulnerable. There are still things that you cannot control. There is no level of resource at which doing the right thing is free. Everyone, even those of us with the most, perhaps especially those of us with the most, have something to lose when we do the right thing while we're incentivized to do otherwise. This is not to say that we shouldn't do the right thing. We should, and sometimes we do. It is a beautiful and inspiring thing when someone does good at great personal cost. But rather than criticizing others for doing the wrong thing, we should make it easy for them to do the right thing. Instead of asking people to decide between reward and morality, we should aim, to the best of our capabilities, to design systems in which doing the right thing for oneself is also the right thing for everyone else. If unhealthy food is taxed, people may be encouraged to eat better. If private healthcare costs were paid per outcome rather than per treatment, then medical billing might be simplified and hospital goals may better align with patient goals. I admit this is primarily an American problem, but I live in the US, so I am biased. If a romantic partner struggles with conflict resolution, for example with angry outbursts or by shutting down, I might consider expressing gratitude or giving them small rewards when they attempt to improve. If I'm struggling with junk food cravings and motivation to exercise, I may institute a personal rule in which I may only eat a cookie after going to the gym for at least 30 minutes. This would also develop delayed gratification, which is another useful skill, but perhaps a topic for another day. These quick ideas are not specific policy recommendations, as any new system will require thoughtful research and design to minimize the risk of unintended consequences, like the one we talked about with vampires and Elder Scrolls Online. Creating systems that align incentives with desired outputs is not always simple, but identifying the problem is the first step in coming to a solution. Shaming or punishing people for bad behavior admittedly can be effective at times, but we should also focus on the systems that incentivize that bad behavior in the first place. Our bad behaviors are often just emergents from poorly designed systems. To change the behavior, we must first change the system.